Back here with Coach Mangini, we're talking Cowboys. After a sluggish 3-5 start, it seemed no one but Jerry Jones had this team making a big playoff run. But since then, Cowboys got a receiver, they shored up a great defense, and they're now preparing for their playoff game against Seattle on Saturday. Seahawks beat Dallas earlier this season, but again, that feels like it was about 38 million years ago. Here's Ezekiel Elliott on his mindset entering the playoffs.
Just knowing, going into these playoffs, I'm going to have probably the heaviest workload I've had all season. So just great getting fresh and ready going into this last stretch of the season, ready for whatever they throw at me. It's hard to make the playoffs in the NFL, and so, that makes the moment that much more important. But, I live for these moments. I love it. I can't wait to go out there and compete Saturday night, and I think this team is ready.
Coach, there's seemingly a direct correlation between how well the Cowboys are playing and how big Zeke's hair is getting, which is why they've now framed him. I know you probably did that when you were coaching as well, but let's focus on the field. How does Zeke and the Cowboys match up against the Seattle team?
Well, it's so interesting when you go back and you do look at the first game. Seattle knew who they wanted to be. They ran the ball 39 times for less than 3 yards a carry, but they were committed to the running game, and that's been something they've been committed to all season, where Dallas in the same game ran the ball 19 times, averaged 8.7 yards a carry, but weren't really committed to it, didn't know what their identity was. And Dallas has done a good job of figuring out who they are and who, more importantly, who they need to be, and it starts with Zeke. And Zeke's ability, their willingness to commit to Zeke in the playoffs, I think is going to be the most important thing, because things do change when you go from the regular season to the postseason, and sometimes you can overthink it, and you can try to do things that is fooling the opponent as opposed to doing what you should do. And so I'm curious whether Dallas will consistently give the ball to him, give him a chance to win the game for him, or whether they'll
try to outsmart themselves.
Yeah, and that's my biggest fear. I don't think Seattle is. I think Seattle's going to they're going to follow the formula that they followed, and they believe in it. I'm not sure Dallas will commit to that.
Well, here's the one thing I'll say, Coach. There are a couple of constants in this game. First of all, the Seattle Seahawks, they're going to have 8 or more in the box against that Ezekiel Elliott Cowboys-led run game. So, I look at this and say, okay, Zeke is used to running against loaded fronts. He's got 75 touches against 8-man fronts. So, this is not going to be anything new for him. I think he'll find a way to have an impact on this game. But to me, it comes down to how effective is Dak Prescott going to be? I think that's why Jason Garrett made the decision to have Dak play in Week 17 against the Giants when they already had the division locked up and they were locked into the 4th seed in the NFC.
What, give him more reps?
No, I think it's about giving him more reps, but most importantly, building his confidence, because Dak didn't have the best game going up against the Seattle Seahawks earlier in the regular season. No. So, this is a situation where you want your quarterback to feel good about his performance and his ability going into a huge playoff game. Because let's keep in mind, Dak Prescott has played in the playoff game, but he hasn't won a playoff game, and the quarterback that he's facing has got eight wins, and he's got a Super Bowl championship on his resume. So, Dak is going to be feeling the pressure of this situation, and they're going to need for him to come through and be able to make plays in the passing game down the field.
What did you think of Jason Garrett's decision to play Dak the entirety of that game? I thought it ended up working out brilliantly for him. Now, that's kind of playing the result rather over the process, but it did allow Dak, career high in touchdowns, 380 yards passing, all of a sudden had a connection with Blake Jarwin we haven't seen all year, made, if it would have been a meaningful game, the biggest pass of his career, that 4th and 15, down 7 in the final seconds of that game. What did you think of Jason Garrett's decision during the week to go with Dak, and then while you're watching that game?
Yeah, well, we go through this conversation twice a year. It's the last preseason game, and it's these meaningless games that don't affect the playoff outcomes as to whether or not you play guys, and everybody has a different approach to it. Now, the big difference to me is there's no pressure on him at all. So he goes out, he's completely playing with house money, and you saw what he could do in that situation. And now we're going to fast forward a week, and the pressure is going to be intense. And I'm curious which guy's going to show up.
Sure.
Ideally, that guy from last week, that's the one that carries over. But that was house money, and now everything's on the line.
You don't get more different scenario than Week 17 locked into your situation and the playoff game the following.
Borderline preseason game where everybody's loose, and that's the best you can be. If you could go into the playoffs with that type of looseness, your guys would play at a really high level. And the big challenge from a coaching perspective is to get them depressurized as opposed to adding more pressure to themselves.
And the one thing you worry about is him regressing when that pressure ratchets up a little bit. And the one thing that we've seen from Dak Prescott is that he has made mistakes at the most inopportune times this season. Sure. I mean, even if you look at the game against the Giants where he played well, there was a sack that he took in the red zone in the first quarter of that game. He had no business taking. Now, the kicker should have made the field goal, but they didn't come up with any points in that drive. Go back to the New Orleans game that they played on Thursday night. I mean, their defense played great. But Dak Prescott had a late game turnover. He took a sack in the red zone, fumbled by Cam Jordan, and they recovered it. Now, it just so happens that his defense bailed him out and got an interception the very next play. But those are situations that a quarterback can't make, especially when you're talking about competing for a championship and winning a playoff game.
Well, obviously, that's going to be the key. Try not to fall behind. Let Zeke be the forefront of that offense. You don't have to place all that pressure on Dak right away, but then that means the defense has to play great.
Well, go ahead. With Seattle, there's a willingness to, if you pick up 1 yard, if you pick up 2 yards, if you pick up 3 yards, there's a commitment to the running game, which opens up everything else because the defense has to be there, play in and play out, and they have to honor it. What I hope Dallas doesn't do is they pick up 1 or they pick up 2 or they have a negative play. Now they think, okay, we've got to get these yards back to the passing game. To me, that's the formula that's going to lose the game for them. Commit to Zeke. And then
that's
see
what they've done in this stretch. In this stretch where they've won 7 of 8, or I'll call it 6 of 7 because Zeke didn't play Week 17. Here's what Zeke's had as far as touches and yards: 25, 187, 32, 101, 31, 143, 29, 135, 40 for 192 in their biggest game of the year. The game basically iced the division, the overtime win against Philly. 25 for 128 in the loss against Indy, and 23 for 109 in the game against Tampa. Like, there's not a bad game in that mix, and all of them are high workload games, which is why it was important to let Zeke have Week 17 off. So, because he has been used at the highest rate of his football career these last 2 months, he now gets to be a little fresh. I don't know who's going to win this game. This, to me, is the closest of all the games because I think Seattle's a little bit better in every area, but home field does matter in the playoffs. And so I think that this game is a real coin flip game. The Vegas spread says it's basically a coin flip game. What I know is this: the Cowboys can't win without Zeke having a good game. They could lose even if Zeke has a good game, but they have Zeke having 16 touches for 82 yards, that's a loss for the Dallas Cowboys. I know that.
And last time they had 19 touches, right? Last time they played, he had 19 touches. But this is a responsibility of the head coach and the offensive coordinator and the quarterback to not be pressing the passing game too aggressively. Commit to Zeke, and those other things are going to open up because you are going to get tons of 8-man boxes, tons of clean looks, and that should make it that much easier to throw the ball.
When you're talking about the Seahawks commitment, I have brought this game up, this random game, probably a dozen times, but I think it's something you'll appreciate. When they were playing the Rams in a critical game earlier this year, Russell Wilson got sacked by Dante Fowler late in the game, so the Rams went from up 5 to up 12. The Seahawks down 12, 5 minutes left. You know what they did to start the next drive? Ran the football, kept running the football. They even down 2 scores, 5 minutes left, stayed true to who they were, and they were, by the way, they had the ball down 5 with a chance to go win that game. They didn't. Seahawks will stay committed no matter what. Can Dallas show the same discipline? All
right, Coach, stick around. Got to take a break. Coming up, is it time for the Steelers to move on from Antonio Brown? Talk about that next on First Things First.